Okay, our recording. Okay, vamos a grabar. We're going to record and we'll see. And there might be some people joining a little bit late, so we're going to, go with the flow. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Okay. We're going to launch into some harder stuff. And actually, I encourage you guys to email me or put in the chat box, whatever works for you. General ideas. Oh, and excuse me, we have to get Trooping of the Color off. Okay. The UK element wanted me to put the YouTube on of Trooping of the Color. We don't need that here. Queen's birthday, all that. They had a 4-day weekend out in the UK. They were very excited about that. Alrighty. I encourage you to either put in the chat box or email me with ideas of other things besides what I have planned. But the big plan is people often start with harder topics to say, well, but how do I talk about the past? How do I talk about that? That's usually, in our speech, we effortlessly shift from present to past, future, and anything in between. And we don't really think about it. We're not really conscious of what we're doing. The last time you saw it in grammar school is probably 5th grade. Come on, seriously, you really remember that? You'll look at it and say, oh yeah, I remember that, but we don't earnestly study it really much past the 5th or 6th grade. So it's been a long time for anybody to, actively be thinking about what does it mean to talk in the past tense. So we're going to do that. But if there are other topics, feel free to pop it into the chat box or email me with other requests. The past is something that we need to be able to use because quite often an idea we need to convey to somebody is something that is done and over with. And that means past tense. Okay. So, this will be easy. English has one way to do past tense. Not really. Past tense is kind of complicated when you think about it. In English, when you talk about something that happened, you might say, let's take a verb. Let's take cook. I cook. I am cooking. I do cook. That's all right now. Yeah. But if we want to talk about the past in English, you might express it as, well, she has cooked every night this week. Has cooked. That's past. We might say it as she cooked last night. Cooked. That's past. We might say she has just finished cooking. That's still the past. We might say, she had cooked a whole meal and then nobody showed up. Had cooked. Oh, no, had, H-A-D, had cooked. You might say, Grandma used to cook the most amazing lasagna. Used to cook. Past isn't as simple as you think, right? We might use many different things in English to convey the idea of past, but they have nuances. Yeah. There are nuanced differences in the past in English between just cooked, has or have cooked, had cooked, cooked, used to cook, and there are probably things in there. Oh, was cooking. Yeah. Okay. So just as English has nuanced differences, Spanish is going to have nuanced differences between different past tenses with some curveballs thrown in there just to make it harder because, yeah, that's the way it is. Okay. But The essential, simplest way of thinking of past tense is cooked, right? We cooked dinner at 7 last night. Okay. We're going to start with, so we're going to talk about past ideas and ways we can use to talk about past ideas. And we're going to start with one past idea in Spanish, which is kind of specific. You can't use it all the time, but it's a past idea that only requires that you know present tense. Yay! So you technically already, theoretically, will be able to know how to use this, but it is quite specific. However, in a pinch, if you have not had time to memorize everything else, it could be helpful. So we're going to take a look at this first. This is a little short video, and I'll have a slide set that'll show you the same information for you to look at your leisure. It is one way of expressing very recent past. This only works for very recent. Can you see this nice young man? Can everybody give me a shout out? Yes, see?
Yeah.
Yes.
See? Okay, we'll play him. And this is using acabar de. Acabar by itself means to finish, to end something. Okay, I'll let him explain.
Hola a todos, ¿qué tal? In this video, we're going to talk about the verb acabar, which means to finish, as in, este domingo acaba el campeonato. This Sunday, the championship ends.
Okay, and that's what that means. Acaba there in present tense, and it's just acaba by itself, is this Sunday, the championship is finishing up, ending. Okay, so it'll finish up this weekend. It'll end.
But more specifically, we're going to talk about the verb acabar plus de. Acabar de, which means...
Now, this is very specific, and this can be used to talk about very recent past. How recent? Acabar de. I would say this could be used for anything that happened a minute ago till maybe 5 or 6 hours ago. Okay. About. So you can stretch the limits a little, but it must be used in this sequence. It's a chunk of words. Acabar de and an infinitive. So the infinitive, it'll be a second verb, a verb that is not acabar. Well, it could technically be acabar, but it won't be 99.9% of the time. Acabar, and we're going to, all you have to know how to do is how to conjugate acabar in present tense. And fortunately, acabar is a very regular verb. Es un verbo muy regular. It's a very regular verb. But you need that little word de in between to get this special meaning. And what it is going to mean is to have just done something. So that's why it's recent past.
Means to have just done something. To have just done something in the recent past. As in, I just ate, or I just swam, or I just walked. This is a really useful sentence structure that you're going to hear all the time in Spanish if you haven't already. So let's take a look at a few different examples so that you can see the context and how it's actually used in a sentence. First of which is, el hombre acaba de llegar. El hombre acaba de llegar. The man just arrived. Or, nosotros acabamos de comer. Nosotros acabamos de comer. We just ate. Or, como acabo de decir. Como acabo de decir. Like I just said, or as I just said. Notice that with all of these sentences, the only thing that changes is the verb acabar. You don't have to conjugate the verb that follows it. And you don't need to know the preterite or imperfect in order to use it. So to conjugate acabar, here's what you need to know. Yo acabo, tú acabas, él, ella o usted acaba, nosotros acabamos, vosotros acabáis. Vosotros is only used in Spain, by the way. Another useful sentence structure that you'll hear with the verb acabar is one that uses the verb haber, which is an auxiliary verb in Spanish, which means we use it in the same way that we say in English, I have eaten or I have walked. In particular, in this case, we're using it in the past tense. So I had eaten, I had walked. So to use this sentence structure yourself in Spanish.
We're going to skip that because you don't need to know that. And that is getting a little too complicated. I think he had one more explanation. I'm not sure.
This way, here's what you need to know. Yo había.
No, okay. And the rest you don't need. Ooh, let me just see.
I encourage you to make
okay, so he was going into all the different tenses. That is TMI, too much information beyond that. Okay, so all you need to know is the part that is acabar, how to conjugate acabar. That is all that you need to know. So we're going to take a look. I've got a little slide set that'll show you how that works. And I will send you the link for this. Okay. Momentito. Okay. But it is talking about the recent past. So you don't need any fancy new tenses, which we will look at today, but you don't need any fancy tenses to use this. You just need to know how to use present tense. Acabar plus de plus the infinitive, okay? And it means someone just finished doing something, okay? So this is a special favorite of folks in Mexico. They like to use this. So we've got some examples here. Tenemos unos ejemplos aquí. Vamos a ver. And you can see that all we're conjugating is acabar, and the second verb that really indicates what you just finished doing stays as an infinitive. Okay, it is unchanged. So acabamos de llamar a José. We just called Joe. Acabas de hacer tu tarea. Did you just do your homework? Acabo de escuchar las noticias. I just listened to the news. And it means you recently finished something up. You know, how long ago? That's kind of fuzzy, you know. I would not use acabar de to talk about something that I did yesterday, something I did a couple of days ago, certainly not a few months ago. It's too recent to using acabar de, okay, to talk about something like a couple months back. It is super, super helpful if you don't know any other past tense, okay? You cannot use acabar de with an infinitive as a true past tense to say that something happened, say, last year or last month, okay? El año pasado yo viajé a Europa. That's a true past tense. Last year I traveled to Europe. Tú estudiaste la química el mes pasado. You studied chemistry last month, and this month you're on a different science. You know, these two things here, folks, these are true past tenses, and these are past tenses that are called preterite, and we'll get into what that means in a minute. Viaje, not viaje. That's a noun. Viaje. El viaje means the trip, but viaje, and notice it punches the end, that is a true past tense. Estudiaste, that is a true past tense. Those are called preterite tense. They are a special kind. And by the way, preterite tense gets a bunch of other names, which you don't care. I mean, you want to be able to use it. You don't really need to know the terminology. Okay, but you can use this acabar de plus infinitives to say that an action happened a short while ago. All right, so it is a nice quick take, I can use this without learning anything super, super new, except for this chunk, acabar de, and plug in any activity you want. Acabo de lavar los platos. I just washed the dishes. A question. acabas de llevar necesito al perro, al perro. La pregunta es, ¿acabas de llevar al perro al veterinario? Did you just take the dog to the vet? Did you just do that? Okay. Acabas de llevar. Llevar means to take, like you put the dog in the car and you drove him over there. Acabas de llevar al perro al veterinario. Okay. So acabar de, and I will send you this whole set of slides, is a nice handy way to be able to talk about something that is pretty recent. Okay. So that is the baby step. That's an easy past tense. Okay. Now, sadly,
Pregunta, por favor.
sí, dime.
When you translate, then you do not have to say, I just did that. In other words, I took my dog to the vet. You don't have to say, I just took my dog to the vet.
Right. If you want to say, I took my dog to the vet, I took him.
Oh, no, my question is sort of the reverse. When I'm translating from Spanish to English,
I just took.
Do I have to say, I just took?
I just took.
You have to
Right.
put the just in there.
In English, right. The English translation is, I just did this.
Okay.
I just did this. Because in Spanish, what the verb acabar means is to finish.
Okay.
So what you're saying is, I just finished doing this. Okay. I just wrapped it up. And
Right.
now I'm done. And it just happened. So it's over with. It's done.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah. All right. Your first little homework. And this will be for next week. So it's something you get to prep. Actually, I'll add a little something in that acabar slide to remind you of what the assignment is. I will add a new slide at the very end of that. What I want you to do is to come in next week and actively use, I want you to say, I have just, whatever it is you just did before coming on. Something you did this morning before you came into class. I just talked to my grandkids. I just cleaned the breakfast dishes. I just walked the dog. Something. It can be anything. Okay. I want you to talk about what I just did, and I want you to talk about what one other person just did. It doesn't matter who that one person is, or it could be a group of kids, I just finished the dishes. My husband just watered the plants.
Mhm.
So I want you to use acabo de lavar los platos. Mi esposo acaba de regar las plantas. Yeah? Así, like that. So I want to use acabo de, infinitive, acaba, talk about anybody else. Acaba de, infinitive. You could be acaban, they just did it. If you got two kids at home and they just finished, feeding the pets, then you might want to say acaban de alimentar a las mascotas, something like that. So talk about yourself and talk about one other person. Okay. And I want everybody to take a turn doing that. You should all have very different things because we all do very different, chores throughout our day. Claro, sí, entienden, understand?
Sí.
See? Okay. And we'll give everybody a little time. It'll be a short, very quick drill, very easy to do. Okay. That is our easy path into past tense. So now here comes the not so easy path. Spanish, sadly, has two past tenses. Why do that? Actually, I believe French does the same thing. Well, but they use a different mechanism.
Do you mean for the French the different avoir versus être verb?
I see. Well, ooh, no. Imparfait. The imperfect in French.
Okay.
And
And
passé
the-
comme passé. I forget. Passé comme passé. I don't remember the exact term, but être versus the others. Yes. Well, okay. Ooh, let me back up a little bit. Let me back up even further now that I think about this, because it becomes even thornier. Only in Spain, they do that French thing of has. Yeah. In Spain, it is actually a little more common to use yet one other structure, which we call in English present perfect. So just to give you an idea, in Spain, if I did something this morning, it would be a little more common for me to not use the actual past tense called the preterite tense. It would be actually more common in Spain to say, I have cooked an egg. If I did it at 8 o'clock this morning, at 6 a.m. this morning, I have cooked, would be a little more common. But in Mexico, Latin America, they're not going to bother with that. So there is yet not two, there is a third issue, but only in Spain. So we're going to take that out of the mix. Okay.
So you wouldn't use acabar then, you just use.
And it's not acabar de. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So please note that in Spain, it is more common for them to use yet another set of conjugations to talk about recent past. So you can see we have a lot of weeds to wade through. So we're going to de-weed it down to this. There are two past tenses, and you need to know when to use one and the other. Oh, shoot. Okay. Literally, if I told you a brief story about what I did since 5:30 this morning, it's literally impossible in telling any story in the past, It's literally impossible to avoid in Spanish that there are two different tenses. Any story in the past will combine two past tenses. It is impossible to avoid this, but for your purposes in learning, we got to do one thing at a time. Yeah. So here's what we're going to break it down to in its very simplest terms. The two past tenses in Spanish are called, oddly, the imperfect, which sounds like there's something wrong with this, but there is not. And the preterite, okay, which in Spanish is called pretérito. Okay. How do we make this the easiest possible? The way we make this the easiest possible is to say that preterite will be one set of conjugation endings, just like you have the o, as, a, amos, an, and o, es, e, hemos, en, right? O, es, e, imos for IR verbs, en. Just like we have those endings in presente, you're going to have a set of endings for what they call preterite. Preterite tense, which has about like 3 other grammar terms for it, is kind of the equivalent of the ED in English. Cooked, talked, walked, spoke. Uh-oh. Spoke doesn't get an ED. Preterite tense in Spanish means the action is done, over with, completely finished, wrapped up, put that away. Okay. Preterite tense indicates a finished action, an action that we mentally know had a definite beginning and a definite end. That's what preterite tense means. So anytime I tell a story, I tell what happened to me or somebody else. Anytime I talk about an event, that will be told with one set of endings called the preterite tense. So here are examples of, if I were speaking in English, things that would be considered preterite tense. I woke up at 5:30 this morning. I got up, I took a shower, I fed the pets. I turned on the dishwasher because somebody forgot to turn on the dishwasher last night. Those would all be preterite. They're events. Okay. There'll be one set of endings for those. The other past tense is called the imperfect. The imperfect means an activity, it's in the past, but it's sort of wishy-washy about that activity. What do I mean by that? What I mean is the imperfect tense is used in Spanish anytime I give a past description, because a description is not an event. If I say it was dark at 5 a.m., or if I say it was light, it was dark, it was light. Is that an event? No. Oh, the sun came up. That's an event, right? But it was dark. It was early. I was sleepy. I was sleepy is not an event. It's a description. Anytime we talk about the past in Spanish, all descriptions use that imperfect tense. These are different endings than the preterite endings. Anytime we tell time in the past, like it was 5 o'clock when I woke up, it was 5 o'clock. Telling time in the past is put into that imperfect realm. I cannot tell you why. Logically, it's not logical, but it is what they do. I think because they consider it descriptive. Okay. So if the idea I want to convey is a description and not an event, it will use the imperfect endings. If the idea is telling time, it will use that. If the idea I want to describe if the idea I want to talk about in the past, if I would use the English idea of I was working, if I specifically use the English structure, was working, they were driving, the kids were playing. Or if I say, I used to walk every morning, used to, was doing, were doing, used to do. Those English expressions fall into imperfecto, imperfect. Okay. This is helpful to know, believe it or not. So, here's where this comes into play. We're going to go with the complicated and then go down to the easy. I might tell you, I woke up at 5:30. I got up, I fed the pets. I watered the plants. Those are all past. Those would all be preterite. But if I choose to describe that instead by saying, it was 5:30 when I woke up, I got out of bed. While I was walking to the kitchen, the pets all walked up to me. Now I'm starting to mix them all. And then I say, and I was tired. It starts to mix all those tenses. So in Spanish, if I tell you those things, it was 5:30 when I woke up, I got up, I walked to the kitchen, I was tired. The pets all walked up to me. I am mixing those two tenses in Spanish. Ouch, this is complicated. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. The imperfect, we're going to start with the imperfect for a reason. And the reason we're going to start with the imperfect is that even though it has the name imperfect, it is actually the easiest out of those two past tenses. It is much easier to conjugate. Yay! It is super easy to conjugate. And the reason it is super easy to conjugate is that it only has 3 irregular verbs in the whole language. Yay. So once you learn the pattern, you know how to conjugate everything except for 3 verbs. Yay. Okay, but let's look at what is imperfect. Why do I need to use it? When do I use it? And then we'll look at how we conjugate it. Okay. When do we use this to talk about the past? It is imperfect because there is no definite beginning or ending. We don't really, so what it means is, I might have done this 15, 40, 105 times. I don't know. Nobody's counting. You think the action is not fitting into a neat box that confines what happened. It's more like a very fuzzy activity or something that happened like wiggle all over the time. Yeah. So here's what I want you to think about when we use the imperfect tense, which is actually very perfect. It is best translated into English as used to do something or was doing something when no ending is defined. So here's the bottom line. If what you mean in English is, I used to buy ice cream with Grandpa every Sunday, this is the tense you use. If you mean, I used to ski when I was young, but I don't anymore. I used to ski. If you would use the phrase in English, I used to ski, then you need this imperfect tense. So it is used to talk about habits, patterns, repeated actions, things that happened over and over and over again, but I don't know how often, like a bunch of times, but who's counting? Also, if you would use the English words, I was walking, I was driving, they were yelling the whole time. If you use was or were with a second verb, that is going to be imperfect tense in Spanish. So these two examples, if the English idea you use is used to or was doing, were doing, that's imperfect tense in Spanish. And I'm going to include my were in that too, because it's a little more specific. Okay. Here's the second idea I want you to think about. Imperfect tense is used for descriptions in the past. I was tired is a description. It's not an event. Okay. Oh, I want you to think about, ooh, I was young. Talking about age in the past is a description. It will use imperfect tense. I was 20 years old is a description. It is considered a description. It will use imperfect in the past. Descriptions. So it was dark, it was light, the mountains were beautiful. She was very young. Those are all descriptions in Spanish, and they will use imperfect tense. Okay. Now, so like kind of the third thing that you need to know is that if we're talking about repeated actions or habits, yeah, those use imperfect. Okay. Anything else? Anything else, guys, is just kind of a corollary to everything. Yeah, numbers 4 and 5 are kind of like corollaries to numbers 1, 2, and 3. So it's kind of important to know why we need this tense. You know, why we use it is kind of important. Okay. Ooh, and I just messed up my spaces. Got it back. Okay. Good to go so far? See? When to use it is a hurdle to get over. So now here's the rub. You might say, I have two. What about the other tense? Don't worry about the other tense yet. Any examples you see of the other tense will just kind of accept on faith that it's the typical add the ed onto the end of the verb. Okay. Preterite, the tense that is not imperfect, which is called the preterite tense, is going to be the event-oriented past tense. So preterite is not descriptions. It is not talking about people's age. It is not used to do something. Preterite is not was driving when an accident happened. No. Preterite talks about events. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and it's boom, done. That's preterite tense. Now, the tricky and nasty thing is that preterite tense as conjugations, it's hard to learn. The reason it is hard to learn is that it has tons and tons and tons of irregulars, tons. And they have to be memorized. It's memorization intensive. Okay. So rather than do the harder tense first, we're going to take a look at this easier tense of the imperfect. And it will become kind of obvious why we're doing this in just a bit. Okay. How do we form this imperfect tense that we use for descriptions, that we use for habitual actions, used to and was doing? Here is what happens. It is a very perfect tense, happily, because most verbs are regular. So it's easy to get to know how to conjugate. AR verbs will all get endings that are like this: aba, aba, aba. And we'll practice these in a bit. Aba for yo, abas for tú. Oh, look, there's still an S on the end. Just like tú, like hablas has an S on the end. Hablabas will get an S on the end for tú. The S on the end means tú, okay? Aba for él, ella, usted. Wow, look at this. Él, ella, usted gets the same exact conjugation form as yo. Do I need to now use a pronoun? Maybe. You may hear pronouns used more frequently with this imperfect if it is not obvious from context. They may still drop the pronoun, but they may plug it in if it's not sure from context. So, yo and él, ella, usted use the same form, aba. Okay. Habamos. We still get a mos ending, but it's habamos. Habáis for Spain. We don't use that because Latin American doesn't like vosotros, so they don't like that. You won't hear it very much. Haban. It still has an N on the end. Present tense, hablar, hablan, with an N at the end. Hablaban, an N at the end. So these patterns you learned from present tense still help you because tú gets that little S at the end. Mos still tells you a nosotros. You just have a little more added on to the mos, yeah? And an N still tells you third person plural, meaning more than one human being. You're talking about them. And of course, ustedes gets us too. So, aba, abas, aba, habamos, habáis in Spain, haban. Okay, perfecto. Vamos a practicar. Wow, momentito. And the aba things becomes very, very funny. I'm going to plug in one extra slide here and just show you how funny it sounds. It sounds really weird. It is, oh, delete, there we go. Okay, here is how weird it's going to sound to you for a while until you get used to it. Hablar becomes hablaba. Sounds like blah, blah, blah. Yay. Yeah. Hablaba. Hablábamos. Hablabas. Whoops. Hablabas. We'll skip the vosotros just to make it easy. Hablaba. Yay. Yo and él, ella, usted get the same thing. And hablaban. Hablaba. Hablabas. Hablaba. Hablábamos. Hablaban. So what does this mean? It does not literally mean talked. In English, we go from talk to talked, from speak to spoke. Uh-oh, we got a weird thing in English, not speaked, but spoke, right? It won't be that. Hablaba will mean I was speaking or I used to speak. Un ejemplo. Let me give you an example. I'm going to use hablaba. I'm going to talk about my grandma. Mi abuela hablaba polonés. My grandma spoke Polish. Mi abuela hablaba polonés. But what I really mean is she used to, right? I could say she spoke Polish, but I would need to use imperfecto because how many times did grandma speak Polish? I don't know, a whole bunch of times. That's what she used to speak. It was the first language she ever spoke. And she spoke in it a bunch of times and yeah. Okay. So she used to speak Polish, hablaba, right? If your grandma used to speak Italian, mi abuela hablaba italiano. And I'm not really talking about like this one time she said this one word. Yeah, I'm talking about what she used to speak. So that's the context in which we would use this. Here's another fun verb to practice in imperfecto. Trabajar. And oh, every 15-year-old in the world loved this verb. Trabajaba. Trabajar. We take off the AR, just like we usually do, from trabajar, trabajaba. The tú form will be trabajabas. Oh, we'll use the same thing for el a usted, trabajaba. And to say they, the they form, trabajaban. I just stick an N on the end of trabajaba and I get to trabajaban. But then here we have this wonderful, troublesome nosotros form. Trabajábamos. Trabajábamos. What a mouthful. Okay, so there are examples of AR verbs in imperfecto. All AR verbs are going to follow that pattern. Okay, let's take a look at ER and IR verbs, because ER and IR verbs are going to share the forms in imperfect, the conjugations for imperfect, just like they did in present. Okay. But instead of aba, 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 it's going to be ia, ia, ia. Take off the ER, take off the IR, and we get ia. Ias, an S on the end still means tú. Ia. Still, the yo and the el, ea, usted share the same form in imperfecto. They just do. Okay. Íamos. Nosotros form. Ia is only in Spain, so we'll kind of skip over that. Ian. We still get an N at the end. Okay. And all of the ER, IR endings carry an accent mark. We always punch the E sound more than anything else. Vale? Bien. Let's take a look at some examples. Vamos a ver. Let's take a look at an ER verb. We're going to take a look at entender. Entender. And by the way, no stem changes in imperfecto. Zero, nada, zip, nothing. So, entendía. Entendías. Entendías. And same thing for, entendía, right? And to make it they, entendían. And then we'll look up at nosotros. Entendíamos. Okay, bien. Yay. No stem changes. That goes bye-bye for imperfecto. Let's look at vivir, and I am going to take vivir, an IR verb, because, you know, if I want to say, oh, they used to live on Main Street. That store was on or they used to live on Main Street. Well, we'll just take it live. To live, vivir, right? Somebody used to live somewhere. Vivía, right? Vivías. Vivía, same thing, right? But when we make it plural, it's just vivían. We just put an N on the end. And then vivíamos. Yay. So, ia, 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 all the way through. There are our examples. Okay. Yeah. Make sense so far? See? Okay. Vale. So far, so good. This is actually, imperfect is a perfect tense because there are hardly any irregulars. Okay. It's a very, very regular tense. I'm going to show you now the 3 verbs because now they're going to come into play. There are 3 verbs that are irregular in this one tense. in the whole language, and that's it. Here they are. These are not going to be endings. Let me show you what I mean. Whoops. Perdón. Aber and ella are endings, right? When we get to the irregulars in imperfect tense, the irregulars have to be looked at as a whole verb. A whole verb. So you will not, like with other verbs, take off the ER and add things onto the S of ser. Ir, we take away the IR, we got a whole lot of nothing. Well, that's why we've got a whole. Oh, you know what? This kind of almost, instead of taking off the ER, you take off just the R. So let's look. The imperfect tense has only 3 verbs in the whole Spanish language, and that are irregular. So it is much easier than memorizing all the irregulars that you've got with preterite. This is why we're starting with imperfecto, because I've only got these 3 verbs: ser, to be; ir, to go; ver, to see. And with ver, you just don't take away the E from the ER ending when you conjugate it. So let's look at how these are. For ser, we're going to use a whole word, not an ending. I was will be era. Era. You were will be eras. He was or she was will be era. They were will be eran. Just the N on the end, okay? And the nosotros will still get a mos, it'll be éramos. But we don't take off the ER from ser and then have an S standing by itself and we tag these on. No, these are like the whole verb, okay? They are one word verbs. Era, eras, era, éramos, erais, okay, only in Spain, eran. I was, you were, he was, she was, the formal usted, right? They were, we were. Okay. Un ejemplo, an example, like, en 1980, in 1980, yo era muy joven. I was very young. Yo era muy joven. I was young. That's a description. Yay. Okay. Let's look at ir, to go. These imperfects will mean somebody was going or they used to go. It's going to have to indicate was going or used to go. Like a repeated, many times you did this. Not, I went to the store yesterday. That's not this verb, right? Because this is imperfecto. And it's a whole word. Iba, ibas, iba. We just put an N on the end, iban, and íbamos. Yay. Okay, here's our third irregular. Our third irregular is ver, and ver is actually going to take these ia endings. It's going to recycle, reuse these er endings, because ver is an er verb. And it's just going to keep this letter instead of getting rid of it. So not too bad. And this is not going to mean I saw. No, 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 no. It's going to mean I was seeing something. I used to watch, used to see something, used to, yeah. Veía, veías, veía. Hard to pronounce. Veían, veíamos. Honestly, ver, probably you use it more in that preterite tense than you do in this imperfect. Because, you know, usually when we express that idea of I saw something, it's I saw. And Veía isn't I saw, it's I was seeing or I used to see. So yeah, that's what that is about. Okay. So, all right. We've got some things to think about here. I'm going to leave you with 2 extra thoughts.
I have a question actually.
Sí, dime, tell me.
About the Sarah one. So you use like I wash, like Joe Abba. I like, for example, I used to hike, for example. So
I used to hike.
So you use that the hike. You don't have to change that.
Oh,
How do you use to hike?
hike is
Are you conjugating that too?
Hike is hacer una caminata. Do a hike. Hacer una caminata. Let me pull up a share screen and I'll show you. Because that verb is a little bit, because it uses a phrase, hike. Hacer una caminata. That is the way they express the idea of hike. Do a hike. We're going to conjugate the do, the hacer. And because you learned there are only 3 irregulars, hacer is now regular. So it becomes, oops, perdón, it booted me out of my keyboard. So it becomes, hacía una caminata. Caminata stays the same because that's a noun. Hacías una caminata, same thing. Hacía una caminata. If my kids all used to hike with me, hacían una caminata, because caminata is always caminata. Does that answer your question?
What I'm asking is like, if I say I used to, like, I used to hike, so that means that you're gonna say it, yo iba a hacer una caminata?
No, it will be this thing you see up here. I used to hike. Hacía una caminata. Hacía una caminata. I used to do that. Because I'm saying I did it a bunch of times. I'm not being very definite about when or how many times, just a lot. This hacía una caminata just means a lot. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying twice. I'm not saying 5 times. I'm not saying once, just a lot. Right?
So what is the example? Like, if you, I'm still confused on that ser one. So
okay.
Like, so if you use the yo aba, so what you're gonna use?
Okay,
like,
the
example of
let
that.
me put the ser up so you can see it again, because this does take getting used to. Okay, can you see the ser now, Juanita? Can you see the ser?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, it's not aba, but it's era. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's era.
Right.
So,
era. So an example. Era. Era muy joven. Yo era muy joven. En 1980. I was very young in 1980.
Okay.
Cuando mis hijos eran niños, eran muy traviesos. When my kids were little, they were very mischievous. They were mischievous is not an event. Well, in my case, it kind of was, but mischievous is a description. So if I want to describe how my kids used to be when they were little, mis hijos eran traviesos. Mis hijos eran perfectos. My kids were perfect. Mis hijos, mi hija era artística. My daughter was artistic.
Okay.
Mi hijo era muy activo. My son was very in motion all the time. Era muy activo. Those are all descriptions of what they used to be like.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's when we use ser, because we use ser for descriptions of what somebody used to be like, right? Used
Got
to
it.
be like. Okay. Does that
Okay.
answer your question? Sí?
Yes, thank you.
Bien. Okay. Vale. All right. Bien. So here's one other thing. Oh, and I've got to start another session soon. So here's what I'm just going to leave you with. I'm going to leave you with a little story to think about, but I want you to, where did it go? Wow. I want you to, okay, sorry. Let me take that off. I've got to find my other thing. Certain verbs you're going to hear a lot in imperfect, like tener, like ser, like estar, like that past version of hay. There are going to be a lot of very easy verbs you're going to wind up hearing quite a lot in the imperfect tense. And they're going to be verbs that you kind of heard a lot. You heard a lot when you first learned Spanish. So I'm going to send you this set of slides because I have to leave and go out to a different tutoring session real quickly here. I'm going to send this out to you in an email. It's going to be these: haber, ser, estar, tener, and ir. You're going to wind up hearing them a lot in Spanish. So I'm going to leave you with these. Okay, so that you start to get used to what these verbs are going to sound like in past tenses. Okay. You're probably not going to have them all memorized yet. Don't put that on yourself. Okay. What I'm going to want you to do is I'm going to want you to take a look at some of those forms just so you kind of get accustomed to what they're going to sound like. And I'm going to send you a very quick video that'll kind of help you with a story setting for hearing some examples of them in an actual story setting. Bien? Okay, so I want you to just kind of get familiar with this one tense, imperfecto, some examples. Come with some examples of acabar de next week. Bien?
Okay,
Okay, gracias.
Vale, okay.
gracias.
And I hate to rush, but I've got a special session I need to start next. So, okay.
Gracias.
Adios.
And I will
Gracias.
record this here. Sí, hasta luego.